Thank you. Okay.
Okay. I guess I'll just start the intro again. Um, Hi. um, Austin John here, or AJ. A large way, my community and I transfer our wisdom and knowledge to the next generation is through storytelling. And on campus, when I go out on a run, I usually take pictures of my surrounding environment, and I I like to write a poem about them or tell a story. So here's one about these trees in the Padlet. So here's what I have. The trees shudder their leaves away with a dire need to store energy, and the windblower awaits below to collect the fallen fellows. In a pile, they are crushed and shredded, compounded to the ground that shelter the hidden trunks the trees hides, until winter passes and the sun stays high. And so this story I wrote in the kind of in the fall, and at that time the trees are all shaking their leaves out, and so to store energy and all that energy is being transferred to the roots, and the trees only transfer that energy back to the leaves and around spring, and that's how I found the inspiration for that story. And then there was like someone blowing the leaves out in the pile to collect them. Sorry. Anyways, here's the next image. Here's what I have for the next image. The garden untouched rests silent, and its resilience is unmatched by those on our elevated beds. Just look at the bushels of red beauty budding at each terminal. They turn crisp in autumn and break free when winds blow. Perhaps when you visit the garden, you'll think them weeds at your periphery. But with a second glance and a call from the master gardener there, you'll remember that they are native. Their resilience draws from the generations of lived experience living on the lands we run upon. And so I spent a lot of time in my campus garden, and we have garden beds that we grow our vegetables in. And on the side, there's like this patch of like grass that's just growing there. And I was like, what is this? And it turns out it's native plants of Merced. Um, and, for a moment, I thought they were weeds, and I'm like, what have we, like, what's going on here? And I was told that we don't water them because they're used to not having a lot of water, and so they grow outside of those garden beds. And when COVID hit, all the plants died because everyone left in the garden, except for these guys. And it was I was very happy to see them still there when I came back on campus this year. Um, and then lastly, this picture, the very end, this one is more personal. This is about the tawa-tawa plant in the Philippines. And this is a conversation with my grandmother and my mom. Speaking of COVID, there was this virus in the Philippines called dengue. And dengue was very prevalent in my community. And my mom was telling me about the story of the Dengvaxia vaccine and how it backfired in our community because apparently the the vaccine, when people were infected with dengue again, got even more sicker than if they weren't vaccinated at all. Dengue, the virus has like an antibody dependent enhancement or something like that, which made it more severe. And so I asked my grandma, what do we do? um, like, did anyone get sick? Because I was relatively young at that time. I wasn't aware of all these things, and she told me no. Actually, we didn't use the vaccine. I'm like, why didn't you use the vaccine, Grandma? And she said, well, there's this plant that grows on the side of the road, and it's called the tawa tawa plant. And I'm like, oh, what does the tawa tawa plant do, Grandma? And she told me that when someone gets sick from dengue, they would get a couple of the leaves from the tawa tawa plant and boil them and let them drink and drink the soup from that, and they'll be cured. And I was like, what? And it was just this whole cycle of like, wow. And speaking of traditional ecological knowledge, this was a good example of that. And I asked my grandma, how did you know? And she looked at me and she said, I just knew. I said, okay. But that's pretty much it. I just thought it would be pretty cool to share these things. A good example of TEK and other stories. So thank you for letting me share.
Wow, Austin, thank you so much. There's some love for you here in the chat, and I feel really deeply moved by your depth of seeing and the how that your poems bring me into relationship with the plant beings, um, and for sharing the wisdom of your grandmother and our elders, and just how much knowledge there is for us to draw from and honor and lift up. And so thank you for being an example of that and sharing some story and in poetry. It's such a good way to communicate. Appreciate you. Thank you. So I'll take the pin off so you can, folks can come back to speaker or gallery, whatever makes sense for you all. We have Britt signed up for opening us next week, next Saturday, and has invited us to bring some art supplies. So thank you for that, Britt. And there is one more slot for the afternoon session on February 6th. So please, if you're feeling inspired, or if you're like, you don't even have to know what you're going to do, but if you feel a flutter in your heart, then go put your name over there. And you can reach out for some collaboration if you don't want to do it alone. So deep gratitude. We want to just take a few moments to open up any reflection from our morning session before we dive in. If love to hear from a few folks what stands out from the morning session. Going to also add into the chat what's one thing you learned, or if there's any questions. So just wanted to give us a few moments to integrate what we covered this morning. We talked about privilege and social identities. We looked at equity and a racial equity lens and how we might apply that to choice points. And then in your breakout groups, you did some analysis around a particular problem or issue that you want to address. So curious if any or what from any or all of that stands out for you.
May I share a fun fact that I learned in the break?
Yes, fun fact.
So it's related to the handedness thing that we started with in the morning. I don't really know how, maybe like my phone was listening to us as we were talking, but I saw this like Facebook ad for people who are left-handed, like a research study. And then I just looked it up on Google, and then I got this Google suggestion, like, what are other words for left-handed? Clicked on that, and apparently one word for left-handed is sinistral, and the word for right-handed is dextral, I think. And maybe I'm thinking too deeply, but I was like, sinistral sounds like sinister, and I come from like a South Asian background, and we have like a moral judgment of people who are left-handed. Like I have a left-handed cousin, and my grandma like taught him to be right-handed because like being left-handed was unclean. And I was just thinking about like like privilege and morality and how like unprivileged groups are kind of taught culturally to be immoral as well. That makes me think of like poor people are just lazy, or a lot of like racial ideas being that like they're not just lesser, but they're also evil, or they're worse, or they're scary. And yeah, that's just like a random thing that I came across in the last hour and a half that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Akif, and for just pointing that out, because I think, you know, in today's world, right hand, left hand may not mean as much, but I think in different cultures and also generationally, there's been a lot of stigma, right, and discrimination for folks that are left-handed, and you know, that is changing in some ways, but it's important to recognize that, and the ways that the kind of associations and deficit mindset, right, where we look at individuals or we place blame or stereotypes or those kinds of associations on folks with who have certain social identities, rather than really looking at the systemic and cultural aspects of it. So appreciate your going a little deeper into that.
I have just a general thank you comment. I think it's so nice to be in a room with people who are so like-minded about similar things. And I've struggled to find a mentor in a career that I'm like very passionate about pursuing. And in this space, I was able to find someone who I really connected with and had a lot in common. And so it's just refreshing to I'm in a graduate program, and sometimes our groups are just tend to be a little bit smaller, and we don't have the opportunity to be in a room with so many people who share similar, you know, passions and strive to make change in a space that is obviously very needed. And so, you know, just allowing us to be a part of something that is like so much bigger than ourselves. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. And just want to reinforce that to really use this time and this group of amazing humans to connect with each other, reach out, like see where you can, that emergent strategy principle, if there's a conversation to have with this group of people, go find it, right? Look at the intro page and, you know, make comments and reach out to folks, or from your breakout rooms if there's a resonance, follow through. So thank you for naming that. Like, this is a really phenomenal group of humans. So tap each other, like lift each other up, and yeah, make this work for you. So thank you. And we're gonna move forward. I'm gonna pass it over to Sharon. We're gonna do some work today and this afternoon around visioning, because if we can't dream it, y'all, we can't build it. And we have been so oriented around fixing problems that oftentimes our muscle, our radical imagination muscle that can dream that future into being, like, we have to strengthen that and cultivate that. So we're going to do some work around that, and then share some different frameworks of change, an integral approach, and looking at the just transition framework, which we think is really critical at this time in our work. So I'm going to toss it over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Aria. Dreaming. I love everything that encompasses that word, and excited to spend this afternoon with you all in visualization and dreaming. I know there is this quote that you all may have seen, and I think it got really popular as a tweet, but I don't know the origins of where it comes from. But I think it goes something like, "It is easier to imagine an end to the world than an end of capitalism." And I want us to change that narrative. It is up to us to dream of what an end of capitalism will look like, to get creative, to feel radical in our ideas and thoughts of a world post-capitalism. So we are going to share a video about a message from the future to plant some seeds, and then we'll reflect right after. Thanks, Aria.
Looking back, it's hard to believe that we've rebuilt our community from the ground up with our own hands. The first seeds were planted way back in the terror and tenderness of the pandemic. And then change bloomed in the streets, in the fire and struggle of the uprisings. Around here, we'll never forget the day that the last prisoners were released, walking out into the arms of their loved ones. The easy part was finding work. The Community Care Corps was always looking for people in those days, whether for universal family care, burying border walls, or green new public housing, going up one pod at a time. Yep, it was a good time for busy hands.
Funny, thinking back to the first wave of the pandemic, that's what you really remember. Hands. Washing, scrubbing, disinfecting, washing again. Picturing each other's hands. All the hands that had touched whatever we were touching. The hands that packed the box, that picked the tomato, that planted the seed. The hands that stroked the brow, that said goodbye. The hands were us. All of us. That web of hand-to-hand, breath-to-breath relationships was a reminder. We are all entangled, making each other sick, keeping each other alive. That was just one of the lessons of COVID-19. It started in the first great pause, when the smog cleared and the rich fled the cities, when poverty dropped its disguise and racist inequality drew the map of the disease. As the roar of the traffic faded, we arose to birdsong and ambulance sirens. The virus showed us what was truly essential. And we learned again and again that so many of us doing essential work were being treated as sacrificial. From nursing homes to detention facilities, meatpacking plants and fulfillment centers, the virus exposed the cruelty of these warehouses of efficiency and profit. Then, things got worse. In 2023, super droughts led to mega floods. Locusts carved a path across continents and hyper typhoons drove millions from their homes. COVID-23 raced through storm shelters and refugee camps. Supplies ran out again. Meanwhile, dinosaurs roamed the halls of power, bellowing that more sacrifice was needed. But every time they cranked up that rusty old machine called economic growth, the cloud of sickness and death grew.
And we couldn't breathe. Couldn't breathe from the asthma in our polluted communities, from the smoke of those fires. We couldn't breathe with a knee on our necks, in the clouds of tear gas as we shouted, "Black Lives Matter." And that is how the virus changed everything. We finally understood that we couldn't keep patching up the same broken systems. We had to build something new. What was needed was a spark. That spark was us. After months of organizing, the viral rent strike was like a starting gun. Then came the essential workers' strike. Delivery drivers, street cleaners, and farm workers got together and said, enough. This time, people didn't just clap from their balconies. We flooded into the streets to join together. One of the leaders was Luciela, a young food courier. When a police bullet stole her life, the crowds exploded in size and then exploded again, spreading across borders like a counter-virus. The sparks looked different in every country as the wildfire strikes leapt across borders. Economies ground to a halt, this time blockaded by workers. We lost too many young heroes as states brought out the iron fist, but it was no match for the raised fist of solidarity. Soon, authoritarian rulers started to topple like statues, and new governments were suddenly nervous about ignoring the streets. We joined hands and pushed further, launching the years of repair.
The first step was rebuilding the economy around the core of essential work: food and farming, care for young and old, public health. Not to mention the essential labour of the more than human world, the winged pollinators, the leafy oxygen makers. The Full Employment Act made the new priorities clear, and there was a wave of new worker cooperatives in everything from mental health support to public art and tree planting. Many bosses were made redundant. Our information ecology needed tending too, and so we built a digital commons, vaccinated it against surveillance, and built up our herd immunity to disinformation. Fossil fuels were running on fumes by that point, so we harnessed their final profits to clean up their messes. Whatever we could, we did outdoors. School, theatre, celebrating. At first because it was safer, then because we realised it made us happier. Nobody talked about missing shopping. Anyway, the right to repair movement meant that a lot of stuff got fixed rather than thrown away and replaced. With life moving at a slower pace, we finally had time to look back. And we began the most important repair of all: repairing relationships. In colonial countries like the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK, those were hard conversations. But truth and reparations commissions helped some of us face the truth about the violent conquests of the past and how they shaped our world. That guided where we repaired and how. It turned out that once we fully funded schools and housing and healthcare, we didn't need those bloated budgets for policing, prisons, and war. And ultimately, the flow of money on planet Earth had to be reversed. So the North finally started paying its debts, and the South finally stopped.
Around here, the Land Back program began the historic process of returning some of the stolen land to indigenous jurisdiction. In the process, we remembered how taking care of the earth lays the ground for taking care of each other. Within just a few years, we could see the bottom of the river again, and it was safe to drink and fish in its waters. Things aren't perfect, of course. Between mutating viruses and our warming world, there's always new storms headed our way. But when they come, we're ready. With our networks of nurses and neighbors, our small farms and big forests, our systems of care and repair. No one is sacrificed. Everyone is essential.
I love that. And last quote, no one is sacrificed. Everyone is essential. Would love to hear from some of y'all what stood out for you while watching this video. What stood out? What did it bring up for you?
For me, it as a community organizer, it kind of showed that, like, after all the fruits, after all of the work and all the seeds being planted, like that there can be like an alternative, and that the other world that we are always working towards building is possible. We might not see it right now, but from watching the video, it was beautiful how, like, looking forward, so many projects that a lot of people are working on are getting developed even more.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it gave us imagery of like what the things we're planting, the conversations we're having now, and what it could actually look like. The power of dreaming. Anybody else like to share what stood out for you? What did this bring up for you?
There are some great comments in the chat.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. So let's see what we have. Using future versions of current issues made the hypothetical future seem more real and in a way made it feel somewhat more feasible. I love that. Dominique, would you like to expand on that at all?
I guess it was kind of like, unless, like, because in the hypothetical future, they actually were somewhat successful in creating a new world. It was kind of interesting seeing like, oh yeah, there's COVID-23, or like the BLM movements are still like an issue like in the future. It was just kind of interesting seeing like, well, the BLM movement was popular, like it became such a big issue recently, but the underlying issues of it have been prevalent like throughout a lot of history. So it was just kind of interesting thinking about like, oh, we haven't really, or like there's no systemic change yet. So unless there's systemic change, it's still going to be an issue in the future. But then in the hypothetical future, like there was systemic change. So then seeing how like everyone became essential, no one was sacrificed, it was just kind of like, oh, it made it more real that unless things change, it's not getting better. So
Yes, emphasis on change and system change. Thank you, Dominique. So Arya?
I just wanted to add to that because I feel like that also really stood out for me in that we have unleashed forces and emissions that we just haven't felt the impact yet because of the lag effect. And so we're going to be facing some storms. Like that's not going to just go away, even if we were to fundamentally change everything now. We still are going to be having to deal with the impacts of climate and destabilization. But part of what gave me hope was the systems we put into place around resilience, around mutual care and repair are what are going to support us to be able to continue to survive and thrive through the chaos and through the crises that we're gonna have. We've got work to do. So not to be like, okay, we fixed it. Like it's an ongoing journey and ongoing practice of liberation. Like we've got centuries of conditioning and centuries of harm, and it's going to take a long time, to do the kind of repair and but so to be real about that, to dream big and bold, of what is possible and what is necessary, and holding that within the realities of what we're facing. So thank you for naming that, Dominique. I just wanted to add some thinking to that too.
Absolutely. And thank you, Arya. That just made me also think of the role healing plays in all of this work, knowing that as we dismantle systems or as we work to acknowledge harm that has been caused, how do we center healing in this process and in all of our work as well? So that just what came up for me as you shared. So thank you. Would love to hear from maybe one more person if you wanted to share. Also, just, what did you think felt possible while you're watching this?
I can go. One of the things that stood out to me when I was watching it is like the section that they had talking about the creation of jobs and how like in the future everyone like had a place to work and it was like fair wages and like there were still a lot of options and still a lot of availability for like employment, because it just made me think about the amount of people that are like, oh no, if we have like a more sustainable, more just world, what about all the jobs? There's no more jobs. And it's just like something to be like, well, one, that's not very realistic, but just seeing that like portrayed on the screen of like, no, look, everyone is doing even better in a society that's set up like this.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that reflection. And it was, and I think what helped make it work was centering the people and centering equity in these decision-making processes. What I also loved about this video is that the narrative or the narrator also changes as different things happen. And I think that's just so representative of working on our projects, of being parts of movement, of building movement, of always having a leaderful movement. And it's not just one individual leader, but there's several leaders, there's several of us all working collectively towards building the future that we want to create. So we're going to spend some time continuing to think of these futures and visualization of even your projects, of the things that you all are working on your individual campuses. So I want us to just feel comfortable, settle in whatever we're sitting in, and just think of 10 years into the future of where we may be. And so do whatever you need to do to feel comfortable, whether that's closing eyes, being wrapped up in a blanket, but just visualize 10 years in the future and what success feels like. What is the future you want to build? What do you see in your future? What is the impact that you want to have? What does impact look like in this future of yours? What does success look like in this scenario? What are some of the images that are coming up for you all as you're thinking of your 10 years into this future? And how are you experiencing joy? What role is joy playing in your futures and in your projects in this 10-year visioning? Can you smell it? What does it sound like? What communities are involved? I really want you all to just feel and see what this world looks like for you. How does it make you feel? What impact did your work have? How do you know? Whose lives did it touch? Can you see them smiling, laughing? And how did it ripple out? And how can you see it? How do you feel it? What does it feel like to be in this world, to be in this future? What made it successful? I welcome you all to come back in. And to just have a moment of thinking and your futures and how are you feeling? Again, I just want to emphasize, and Arya had shared this as well, but not only do we have to be the change we want to see or be in the world, but we also have to dream that future as well and dream the change that we want to see. And so Arya dropped a project development worksheet in the chat. We would love it if y'all can make a copy of this worksheet. So download it, make a copy so y'all have it, so you have your own copy. And then we want you to draw and or write your vision and your future. So we're going to give you all some solo time, some 10 minutes of solo activity, and you can draw or write, but what impact did your project have? What does this future look like for you? Whose lives did it touch? How did it ripple out? And what made it successful? So you all should have this worksheet. Before we go into the solo 10-minute, we'll have about 10 minutes and we'll play some music for y'all. Does anybody have any questions about this activity? If not, then we'll reconvene back around 150, 151, 152. It's 142. So we'll give you all about 10 minutes to do this.
I could go ahead and share a little bit. So my project, for a little bit of context, my project is environmental justice based, and it's to create a environmental justice collective that is student-centered on campus. And one thing that I always think about is how I feel like a lot of what happens within UCI, in my experience, is so isolated from the surrounding community and from the rest of Orange County. And so one thing that I saw in my envisioning 10 years from now was the connections that this environmental justice effort would make with all the different community organizations in Orange County that are working towards a similar goal. And yeah.
I love that. Communities coming together, organizations coming together. Would anybody else like to share? Would love to hear a few more voices. What did you see? Oh, go ahead, T.
Yeah, I can share what I wrote. So I think in my future, I hope to see an environment where food production is sustainable, because people take a different approach to how they see our resource, as rather than just input, but as natural material that is given to us by Mother Earth. And it's driven by the people who will only take as much as they need. So the greed within people, in terms of both resources such as money, or just people who are, like just purchasing a lot of stuff that they don't need, and hence wasting a lot of food. Yeah, so just the distribution of wealth and food is the main driver of a sustainable food production.
I love that. Thank you. And we have time for one more reflection. What about you, Leslie? Would you like to share your future?
Sure. It's kind of hard to grasp. My project itself is very technical, but it is a project we want to have persist. We're working on improving building operations to use less energy, with kind of a longer term goal of seeing the health campus be more energy independent, and being able to build out more buildings that are also sustainable and can continue on. So I guess I was just kind of thinking about what the health campus will look like in the future and how we can expand in a way that's still reducing emissions.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for taking time to dream and visualize your futures. We're going to continue to have this as a theme. Visualization and dreaming should continue to be thought of throughout this rest of the retreat and used for your projects and for all of your movement work. I'm going to pass it over to Aria.
Beautiful. Yes, it's the principle of what you pay attention to grows, right? So feeding that vision. And before we're going to be doing a lot of kind of thinking and strategizing and applying frameworks to our projects. We want to mix it up a little bit and bring in some of our body wisdom, because we're not just heads in a box on a flat screen, but we're mammals with flesh and blood. So want to invite you all to experiment with me and do a somatic practice, a body-based practice that will help us, even while we're sheltering in place and we're in our living rooms and bedrooms and all of that, that we're actually connected and that we're moving together toward a shared future. So if you all are game, I'm going to ask you to come on to video and also to come off of mute, unless it's super crazy loud. You don't have to, but I'm also going to invite you, if you're able or willing, to stand up. You can do this sitting. So if you do it sitting, and maybe Sharon, you can do it sitting, but put your bum on the edge of the chair so that you have some room and your feet are firmly planted on the ground. So if you're standing, go ahead and stand up. If you're sitting, come to the edge of your chair. And this is a practice that I learned through this body of work called generative somatics, and it's a rowing practice. So we're going to row together. Thinking of all of we might be in one boat. You might think of us all together in one boat or in a bunch of different individual boats, but that we're moving to a shared horizon, a shared future. So if you can put one foot in front of the other, and we're going to grab some oars. And the way we're going to do this, well, first, let's just move our weight forward and back. So you're going to be bending your knees to move your weight forward and back. So if I'm like this, my whole body is moving forward and back in one plane. And so as you're doing that, take the oars and begin to just imagine yourself, and this is just a felt sense, that we're rowing toward our shared future together, this future that we are longing for, that we're here to build. And we can see each other in their living rooms and bedrooms and homes, and we're all rowing. And I want you to call out, what are some of the visions you have for our shared future? Where are we going? So I might dream of worker cooperatives, future where everyone knows they belong and are valued. Let's hear some of your visions, just calling them out.
Clean air.
Clean air.
No more food deserts.
Yes, food is abundant and healthy. Everyone has access.
School gardens.
Yes, gardens. Just feeling this in your muscles, feeling the shared effort, the shared future that we're all working together. And what's going to help us get there? What are some of the values?
Everybody knows they belong.
Yes. Love.
Yes, radical love.
Justice.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Compassion.
Compassion. Organizing. Beautiful. Just taking a few more rows together, imagining all of your colleagues, your comrades, your fellows, doing this work together, even though we're all in different locations right now. We have a shared planet and a shared future and shared values that are going to help us get there. And then let that rowing come to a close, just taking a moment to sit or stand. Just feel whatever energy is moving through your body, feeling the sensations. And as you sit or stand, just touching into your dignity and the shared dignity of all of those here on this call. feeling your past and feeling your ancestors, your lineage, all the wisdom that you bring to this work behind you at your back as a resource. Feeling the front side of your body in this future that we're moving forward into together. And centering in what matters to you, what you care about. Bringing that vision into the center of your being, into your muscles, your bones, your blood, your breath. Grounding that vision in your body, in your heart. And just feeling our connection with each other. Each one of you who said yes to be here, to this fellowship, to this work, to this life. Feeling our interconnectedness in this struggle. That we need each other. And bringing your eyes open if they were closed. Bringing yourself back. Juliet, can you tell us a little more? How was that?
That was great. That was a very productive practice.
What showed up for you? What felt productive?
Well, I think a lot of actually like a huge part of rowing is that everyone needs to be in sync and rowing together. And so like I actually think that was a really great activity in terms of like showing collective action and not just on the water, but in the real world and how we need to work together to move to where we want to go.
Thanks, Juliet. How was that for other folks? Anything else that you want to name? Katie, how about you?
I thought it was really nice to just like feel, even though it was a virtual or this meeting is virtual, I feel very connected to everybody.
Thanks, Katie. And Ode, if you're open to share any reflections from your experience.
Yeah, I thought it was really just like inspiring, just being in motion and just like absorbing like people's visualizations. I thought it was just like really put me in like just like beautiful way. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Ariad.
We're in it together, y'all, and we really need each other. So just want to keep deepening in that, you know, how we can build collective power, and it's not just up here, but how we really bring that into our bodies. So we're going to talk a little bit about the wheel of change, and this is comes from the Social Transformation Project. And let me open up my screen, or could you share the screen, Sharon, briefly? So this is the how, right? These are, we have our vision where we want to get to, the world that we're wanting to build, that we want our projects to be in service to. And want to think about a multi-dimensional approach, because oftentimes projects fail or they don't stick because we are only touching one aspect of it and we're not thinking of it more holistically, right? So there's different dimensions that we want to address or incorporate into our how and the strategies that we use to achieve our vision. And one of them is the heart and mind. We've heard this probably before, but this is in many ways the story that we carry that helps us to understand who we are, what's possible, what's not possible. This is the beliefs or perceptions that we carry about what the problem is or about what solutions are going to bring us forward into that future. And we are in the midst of a world in which misinformation is really prevalent, and we see the real life impacts of that right now in COVID, where people still think that it is a hoax when we have over 4,000 people dying every day. And in many ways, those deaths are connected to the beliefs or the perception or the understanding of the problem, right? And so this is so critical. It's one of our deepest leverage points for change, because the worldview that we have, the story that we're living from, is what's going to give rise to the types of systems and structures that we create and the solutions that we develop. So the education and engagement work that y'all are up to, right? Like this goes into all aspects in many ways of if we're trying to shift behavior or change systems or structures. If we haven't addressed people's underlying beliefs or worldviews, then we might just revert right back, right? And so this is a really incredible aspect of how we want to create change and social transformation. The others is our behavior, right? These are the things that we do or don't do. These are our choices, our habits, the norms or unspoken agreements by how we interact with each other. And a lot of campaigns or development efforts, really try to address behavior change, the ways that people act or the things that they're doing, but don't think about the heart and mind aspect or the structural piece. And so this is where we're looking at systems change and the kinds of institutions and organizations and systems and structures that are in place, the relationships and coalitions. So you can think of, let's say we're launching a big recycling effort, right? And we have all the systems in place, but people have had these long entrenched habits or don't understand why recycling is important. There might be the bins and the trucks coming to pick it up and take it to the recycling center, but no one's recycling because nobody knows the value of it, or there isn't a shared value. People, if they don't have that understanding or belief, they're probably not going to change their behavior, which requires some effort, right, to change habits. Or you might do all of the work of changing hearts and minds and people understand and they're recycling, but if you haven't created a system that's going to pick up the recycling, people are much less likely to do it, right? Because there's nowhere for it to go. There's nowhere that it's being processed. So we want to think about it in multiple dimensions. So we're going to give you a few moments again to spend some time thinking in your project area. And this is on the second page of your worksheet that you all have downloaded and or have a copy of after the vision. And take some time to think about these three different dimensions and how they might apply. So, in what ways, what beliefs might you need to develop or shift? What story do you want to cultivate? Or who's the messenger, right? How are you doing that work of shifting our understanding, analysis, perception, story? What might be some of the behaviors that need to shift? What skills might people need to develop, or what actions need to take place in order to achieve your vision? And then on the systems and structures level, what needs to be transformed? What might need to be built? So we're going to take about 5 minutes just for you to begin to jot down some of your ideas and thinking about your project from these different dimensions. Are there any questions on what we're asking you to do, or just about this framework? Awesome. So this. All right, welcome back, y'all. We're gonna go to break in a few minutes, but I'd love to hear from a couple of people What are some of the things you're thinking about in terms of change strategies for your project? And I'm gonna call in some folks we haven't heard from yet. Jesus Pena, if you're willing to share.
Sure. So the part of the wheel of change that stuck out to me the most, at least for my project, I'll back up. I'm a GFI fellow, and my project is focused on developing outreach material for Spanish-speaking communities. I'm doing this through the UC Agricultural and Natural Resources News and Outreach in Spanish division. So what stood out to me is this idea of hearts and minds, and it kind of harkens back to what we talked about earlier, is that, you know, there's this aspect of trust that's missing. So I can write a whole bunch of blog posts about the microbiome and what it does to agriculture and put it out there, but I don't know that it will be received in the way that I would like it to be received if there's not this trust that's been built between you know, myself, scientists, and the communities that that we're trying to reach.
Awesome. And I'm thinking about even, you know, from what Austin shared, and just, you know, what are the stories, the cultural stories or the lived experience that people know about soil, you know, in relationship to farming. And yeah, that's great. Thank you for that work. Let's see. Ronith. You there, Ronith? No, Roith. Sorry. I thought it was an N.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah, we were just talking about our projects for a little bit and how it fits into this like making change. And we were like happy to see how we were just a lot of the problems we saw with the institution. We're happy that we're discussing it here at this training, and we were both not really expecting that, which is really nice.
And any particular change strategies that stand out for you in your project and what you're wanting to accomplish?
I really want to kind of change like the culture at my campus. I want to try to get people to try to support the staff more, and kind of, Chris, a lot of the people I feel like aren't supporting our groundskeepers, and they really feel like they're feeling the brunt of it, especially because they're the people who are currently on campus right now. So I really want to try to, with my project, try to engage more people and get more people in support, help reduce their work, and kind of create this little like social like way for everyone to get out and meet each other and know that like, hey, like we support you and we're happy you're here. That's what I want to do, but we'll see what happens and if that will ever come to fruition, but we'll see.
I love it. It's a beautiful and really, really important vision. And if folks have ideas to get that spark when people are sharing out their projects, please, you know, reach out and support each other in that way. It's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tatiana?
Sure. So we were talking about just talking about our projects, kind of what the goals were. And I actually realized something through our conversation that would be kind of beneficial for my project, which is like putting together like a comprehensive like resource list for people who want to get more involved in sustainability at UC Davis Health. Just because I was thinking about like my audience, right, is like medical students, doctors, nurses, and something I wrote about in the document, the project document, was it's tricky sometimes to engage that community in sustainability or talk about climate change, because especially right now, things are so busy in that sector and it can feel sort of something to deal with later, or, you know, things like that. So just educating them on what little things they could do, as well as what systemically is being done already. I think that's a big part. And also what we talked about in the breakout room is, I think a big first step is just letting people know what's already being done, because there is so much happening at all of our campuses that being able to compile that together in a way that a lot of people from different communities can all understand and share easily is really important in moving forward. Because if we don't know where we start, how do we go on? So I think that's the kind of like the first part of my project. And then I'm interviewing a bunch of variety of different people within the health community, including surgeons and doctors and medical students, about what they think about sustainability and how they've contributed. And they've done such phenomenal work. It's awesome. But I think to speak to the last question, or like, how do we engage our communities more? I think we all like to hear from each other. Sometimes it can feel daunting to just like listen to one like large institution telling you something. So if in your projects you can incorporate each other, other students, other medical students or doctors. I know for me, I love to hear from other students. What are their experiences? How are they dealing with things? Because it makes me feel better. And it also just kind of brings us together more.
I love that. I love that. And that you're creating this network of just free flow of information, and also thinking about creating opportunities for dialogue in the ways that you're naming, bringing multiple diverse stakeholders together to learn from each other. And from a popular education perspective, if y'all are familiar with Paulo Freire and his work around popular education and pedagogy of the oppressed, it's a methodology of learning and analyzing our reality through dialogue, through that collective action. So the more we can create opportunities like what you're speaking to, of people coming together, sharing stories, sharing their knowledge, sharing information, right? The more access and the more relationships and power that we're building. And I'm also seeing that Sarah says to reach out to you, to her. So beautiful. We're going to have more opportunity when we come back for you all to be in small groups and to share and discuss your projects. We're going to talk a little bit about a just transition framework that is critical in how we transition and transform from extractive economy to a regenerative one. So take a break. Good work so far, and we will come back in 5 minutes. So go take a bio break, enjoy. We'll see you in a bit. Kick it off.
Welcome. Welcome back, everybody. And Aria, will you be able to share screen and video? Okay.
Want me to put it in now?
Yes, that would be great. So we're going to spend the rest of this afternoon talking about just transition. And we have a video that we would like to share with y'all that will dive into a little bit more about understanding economy and extractive economy and what it would take to move towards a regenerative economy. So we will watch this video.
There's a lot of talk about the economy these days. Some people say the economy's taking off. Some people say it's tanking. If you really want to make sense of the economy, it's useful to take a big step back and ask yourself, what does economy really mean? At the heart is this tiny little word eco, and eco means home. Ecosystem is all of the complex relationships of home. It's all the living things, it's all the people. An ecosystem isn't just the catalog of all those things, it's really the relationships. Ecology is the knowledge or study of home. It is the prolonged and thoughtful observation of the living world around you and the consequences of your actions in it. And then you get economy. Economy is simply the management of home. So there are three basic pillars that are true for all economies. You need resources. You need land, air, water. You need the living world around you. The second pillar is you need work. You need labor to combine with those resources to produce stuff. And then you need a culture, a cosmology, a worldview that tells us what we can do with our labor towards what ends with the world around us. Then what are the pillars of the dominant economy, the economy that's all around us right now? Well, we get our resources through extraction. We forcefully remove them from the earth. We call this the extractive economy because it's extracting labor as well. We don't view labor as its own valuable natural resource to be applied towards the well-being of ourselves and our communities. And the culture, the worldview, is one in which we can have endless and infinite growth that either ignores or denies the real ecological and social consequences. And the rules that govern this economy, with the use of speculation and financial instruments, are towards one very particular end: the accumulation of greater and greater monetary wealth and power.
The big corporations are being governed really for the benefit of their CEOs. It's not even for the shareholders anymore. Certainly not for the workers, certainly not for the communities.
The same way that the basis of modern production is extraction from the planet, modern finance is extraction from the larger community towards the financial community, towards 1%.
The system rewards certain people's effort far more than others.
This is not only an economic issue about who's getting the money, it's also a racial issue, it's also a class issue.
Capitalism has exploited people and often leaves out people of color, immigrants, minority communities, women.
At some point, people are like, no, you cannot do that to me and to my community in my home. And therefore, the only way to keep it going is to use force. It's a banks and tanks economy. So the question is, if the extractive economy is what got us into the mess we're in right now, can it get us out? Not likely.
What is required is fundamentally to transform the way things are structured.
The depth to which corporations are integrated into economies around the world mean that we absolutely have to think at the global level, at the international level.
We want to make sure that our productive systems are sustainable. We can't hope that a concentrated power on top just starts acting better. The way that we've been shown that can actually make sustainability in the long term is by breaking that power and by sharing that power democratically.
We need to explore new ways of managing home based on that thoughtful and prolonged observation of the living world around us, ecology.
The new economy has to step away and then push back at those old pillars, because it has to be a new economy that is about sustainable resources, that puts people before profit, that puts planet before profit.
The first pillar is to rethink our relationship to resources.
There's simply no way that we can have this endless, limitless, infinite growth on what is, I think, obviously a finite planet.
The second pillar has to replace the exploitation of human labor with a recognition that all wealth comes through work. And when we take our labor and apply it towards economic well-being, we can create a new cycle that's not based on extraction, but that's based on regeneration. That requires a new third pillar, a new way of imagining our relationship to each other and to home. It's not only possible, it's happening all around us.
One of the most inspiring things is that there are people and groups all over the country and the world who are organizing both to meet people's needs and to actually confront the systems that are underneath the crises.
Underlying all of it is the small d democracy.
I think it could actually change the way things are going, to have people actually participating in the decisions that are governing their lives.
Any economic transition has to have this notion of restructuring the way we think about ownership.
Resources are owned by people, by communities. They are not owned by a corporation. The privatization of resources will have to end.
That demands some political muscle, some organizing muscle, and some idea muscle.
How do we develop new business models that create more local ownership and more democratic ownership?
Not just bringing food into communities, but who owns the stores?
Who's processing the food? Who's selling the food to the hospitals and the schools in the communities?
We believe that the more people that have access to opportunities to be able to thrive, the better our society will be as a whole.
Even philanthropy is looking to change.
The greatest task philanthropy has is not simply to give to what exists, but to reimagine what is possible.
The most basic thing we're talking about is human consciousness, and not in the sense of self-awareness, in the sense of how we behave, how we think, how we understand the world we're in, and how we form relationships. And the extent that we start transforming those understandings and those relationships, that's part of forming the new economy today, here and now.
By looking at how we live, we can find how we can live better, more interconnected lives, and simultaneously invest in and build the economy we know we need, and maybe even be happier for it.
Great. Thank you all for watching and viewing that. Something that I would love for all of us to just reflect on is, how do we transition from a world of domination and extraction to a world of regeneration, resilience, and interdependence? What does this transition look like for all of us? I think as we're talking about just transition, it's important to not just talk about jobs and economy, and it's not just about that part of the puzzle. It's really about ensuring that people who are marginalized or underrepresented are at front and center of this movement. It's all about people power. It's ensuring that we are creating access for more individuals to have more ownership and power in their decision-making capabilities. I think when we're also looking at just transition, it's also looking at how movements we can no longer act, independently, and that we really must act and work alongside others. And that means climate movements need to work and integrate with labor movements, and that we need to work alongside racial justice movements. And that I think building and moving towards the just transition is really making sure that all of our movements are working together. And to carry on some of the themes that we had shared earlier, it goes back into seeing and each other as humans, and to understanding one another's struggles and oppression, so that we can continue to work towards collective liberation. And this work, this movement, this building and going into or creating a regenerative resilience and interdependence economy and world, this is the work of our lifetime. This is the work and the reasons why you all are here on a Saturday afternoon, because you believe in this. This isn't, you said, like, I think Aria had mentioned this earlier, you all said yes, and that's exciting, and that's why we are all here together. So something for all of us to kind of continue to keep in mind, and this could be focused when we go into our project worksheets. This could be something that you all focus on, either within your projects or also just your own individual and personal level, and your own personal resilience. So the next piece on the project worksheet that you all have under, that you all downloaded, we will be looking into the different pillars of economy and asking you all to think of where your projects are at and how they're reflecting on these different aspects of it. If you are just beginning your project, you can even just answer these questions at, how can you see things at an individual level? Are there worldviews that you need to change, or are there things that you need to reconsider? If you're in the middle of your project, you could also look at is there anything that you can do to tweak your project to make it more just? Are there more voices that you can center and bring in? And I just kind of also maybe even want to take another step back of going back to just transition, and then when you all are moving forward and looking into working on this project, of continuing to think of, what does it mean to center justice in the work that you're doing? And what does it mean to center equity in the work that you're doing? And what does it mean to center love in the work that you're doing? And how can you apply these values into thinking of a regenerative economy and thinking of moving in and towards a just transition. So the worksheet will look into these different topic areas: purpose, ecological and social well-being. We would love for you all to answer, how does this project promote ecological and social well-being? Does it minimize disparities, build collective power, or address harm? Looking into the resources, are they regenerative? What natural resources are being used? What are they not being used? Or what's not being used? Does it support a regenerative use of resources? And how are you even defining resources? Something for you all to also consider as you are working in this. And then labor. Some of your projects may not integrate or be, have a labor component, but if so, how are workers being treated? How is labor being compensated? Does your project create more equity or improve working conditions? And I know someone had shared, like, even thinking of like, how can we better support our groundskeeper? Is there a project that you're building in terms of gardens, and who's going to maintain the garden that you're creating afterwards? Is it going to fall on the hands of the groundskeeper? And is that going to be added on to their overall responsibilities? How do we ensure that their voices and whoever may be involved is being centered, and that they're being part of this thought process? And then with worldview, sacredness and caring. What are the values, stories, beliefs that are perpetuated or shifted through this project? And how does it promote sacredness and caring? And just take a moment to even think of those words. What does sacredness mean to you, and what could it mean for this project? And how can your project help honor that and honor aspects of caring? And then governance and deep democracy. Who makes the decisions and how are they made? Does it support inclusive participation? So as we go into a solo activity, does anybody have any just other additional questions or comments or thoughts that y'all would like to share before we go into just a few quick minutes to do a solo reflection? And then we're actually going to break out into groups. So we all want to give you a moment to do the worksheet first. All right. So you all will have about 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, to work on your project worksheet by yourselves. And then we'll welcome you all back, and then we'll put you all into breakout groups. If you are able to, please share your video so we know you're here and that you're back. Lovely. Awesome. So we're going to open up rooms, and you all will get a chance to work in with whatever campus you are with. So you'll get to meet each other and have some time to interact with folks from your campus. And again, some things to consider when we're talking about just transition is asking questions of like, what makes you mad about capitalism, and what are the things that bother you, and how do we break those systems apart, and what do you want to see? And something, even just thinking of this current moment as we're in a pandemic, and as we transition ourselves out of this, what do you want to leave behind from the world that we are in, or from the world before? What do you not want to be a part of anymore? And where is there space to create more equities as we're living in a pandemic? Personally, one thing I've learned is that disability justice movements have been organizing online for a very long time, and now everyone is doing it, and we're learning how to make things more accessible. So are we going to continue to make things accessible for folks? So thinking of transition, we will open up breakout rooms. Hope you all have a good time in your conversations, meeting with your campuses.
Can I just add one piece, Sharon, as they go off? Just so that everyone gets a chance, make sure everyone gets a chance to speak, especially if it's a bigger group, so that you can introduce yourself, share your projects, and any strategies you've identified today, and how you might support each other. So
yes, thank you, Aria.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome back, everyone. And Maria, if you want to stay on for a few minutes after we close, if you're available for that, we can catch you up.
Welcome back, everybody. We hope your conversations were fruitful and that you all got a chance to meet one another and hopefully found ways to continue to connect and collaborate. Would love to hear maybe just like one thought, one reflection from just what you're holding, what you're thinking in terms of just transition, your project, your conversations that you had, whatever is on your mind. And I think I will call on someone that we haven't had a chance to hear from today. What about you, Mehul? Mehul?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I think just today and yesterday overall, I think the transition to a just transition was really nice, and it kind of made me think more about how I can change my own project. Like for context, mine is getting a solar table installed on a campus. And I think with that, I can add some more like educational aspects to it. So that way it's more than just like a table being there, but like more education and outreach opportunities. So that way the impact is more than just giving students a convenient place to work, but you know, just kind of allows them to learn more and hopefully spread more sustainable information.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Yes, how do we add education as part of that process and give students like, do more than just like maybe a physical animate object? Lovely. Thank you all. I'm gonna hand it over to Aria for closing.
Great. So I'd love for all of you to take a moment to think back through our day today and the things that we shared, the conversations you had, the frameworks we offered, the ways you're thinking about your project, and think of one thing, an insight, an idea, a question, a connection, a strategy that you identified or that you are walking away from this session, these last two sessions with. And please take a moment to write it into the chat. By way of closing, we'd love to hear from everyone. Part of your own integration process. Yes, any solution to climate change needs to also address our economic system as a whole. The just transition is more than just jobs. Reorienting from an extractive to a caring paradigm. It's huge. I highly recommend reading the Just Transition zine that is in your Google site under session 3. It's a really comprehensive breakdown and really fleshes out all the aspects of a just transition and the different strategies. How do we create buy-in with stakeholders and resource holders when our projects seem antithetical to the status quo? Great question. Centering our work in equity and justice throughout, creating a just transition. Radical and systemic change will be hard, but it is absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary. That's right. Thinking about all the dimensions of change to have a significant impact. Integrating optimism and open-mindedness. That's right. Our interconnectedness, or the interconnectedness between ecological and social well-being. That we are not humans living separate and on top of a planet, but we actually are the living consciousness of this planet Earth. Really knowing how deeply interconnected we are. That's right. And not to overstretch ourselves. That's why we do this work together. We need each other. We can't save the world all by ourselves. And that paradigm is something we need to let go of anyway. Because it's old school. It's not working. The white savior or just the individual lone ranger. It's all of us or none of us. We got to do it together. Yeah, the power, the word regenerative, meeting other fellows, getting inspiration, building collective power by listening, dialogue, sharing ideas, building relationships, collaborating, lifting each other up, building a culture of appreciation. Capitalism is rooted in competition and tearing each other down and inadequacy, right? Gratitude is a subversive act in regard to capitalism, that we can appreciate that we are enough and we have all that we need to create the changes that we need. It's beautiful. So thank you all. Thank you for your hearts, your minds, your strategic visions. Explore the resources that are available for you on the Padlet or on the Google site. All of our work from today will be up there. The slide decks will be up there, the Zoom recordings. If someone didn't make it and you want to make sure they catch up. We still have a session for the Saturday afternoon for creative opening, but Britt is gonna kick us off when we join back together in a week. So take deep care of yourselves and reach out to each other. Use this, this Padlet, your critical questions, resources, opportunities, and also feel free to add your projects to your introduction Padlet and take some time and look at who's here. I know we're trying to create as many opportunities for you all to connect and meet each other, but use that as a way to also connect and collaborate. And I'm going to close this out with just these last few words from the amazing youth poet laureate Amanda Gorman, who shared the inaugural poem. And actually, I'm going to ask Janelle if you would read these words for us out loud.
Sure. A new dawn looms as we free it, for there is always light if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. Amanda Gorman.
So with that, y'all, go forth and be the light. And have a good week. We'll see you on February 6th, 9 a.m. Thank you for sharing your day with us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.